Hello, everyone. I'm Alan Wenzel, Freepod host, thanking you for tuning in to this week's Freepod interview. Recently, the city of Freeport hired a new police chief to succeed retiring Chief Chris Schoenberger. And today I'm pleased to be speaking with the new chief, Jacquelyn Frausto, Freeport City Chief of Police. Chief Frausto, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. Good morning.
Good morning to you. And I'd like to begin, Chief Frausto, by asking you just to tell us a little bit about your background. How did you become a law enforcement officer? And where's your career path taken you up to the point where you arrived here in Freeport?
I think that's a great question when it comes down to a person who sits in any chair, in any chair of leadership. So it goes back to Chicago. I was born on the south side of Chicago to first generation, some parents that actually crossed over to from Mexico to Chicago. At the time, I think it was under Carter or Reagan. Now I'm really dating myself. I think it was Carter, President Carter, where if you had a child born in the United States, you were able to, fix your papers and become citizens. So that was the plan for my parents. So my mom, when she crossed over while she was pregnant with me. And we led a very, very poor life, very, very poor. We went from apartment to apartment. I remember digging in the garbages for food, digging in the garbages for anything that anybody would throw away. We didn't have the most sanitary type of apartment because I remember we had mice. My mom and dad worked very hard. Sometimes I would be left alone and I just sit and read. And that's the one thing that I remember always doing, sitting and reading and just watching the mice go by from one corner of the house and the other corner of the house.
Wow.
Then one day my dad got up and went to go buy milk and didn't come back. So my mom was a single mom of two kids, a little one. I do have a brother. And I was in charge of my brother because my mom had to work. So I think what that experience led to me was survival and gratitude. And the fact that the one thing that my mom has always taught me and the one thing that I will take away from is the fact that she was very much on education. And she was highly educated in Mexico when she came here to the United States. That really didn't mean anything. So she had to start all over again with certificates. And she works, in the medical field. And she always said, the one thing that no one can ever take away from you, no matter what it is, even if it's people, if it's, a natural disaster or your poor decisions is your education, you can start all over again. So that really resonated in me. And she worked hard at putting us in private schools. And she was a hard worker. She was a hustler and she would have 2 to 3 jobs and she put us through private school by herself. I went to a private high school that's no longer there. I went to a private grade school. Now it's a public school, but I do remember where I didn't look the same when I looked left and right in those classrooms. I didn't. I was in an era where if you didn't look a certain color, a certain creed, you were treated differently. But what I did is I turned that around and I said, I'm not going to be treated differently because I'm going to use my education to be at the same level.
So your mother encouraged education for you and your brother and really made it a top priority for the family.
Absolutely.
And that sounds like was the path for you to be able to overcome some of those early challenges that your family had.
Yes. I will say that, when I sit here now, I have 2 bachelors, 2 masters, and I have a PhD.
Oh my gosh. Oh, wow. That's a lot of degrees.
But I love school. I love academics. I love knowledge. I love what it teaches you and how you can transfer that over to people who you meet. I took that same thing, that same knowledge and way of looking at things, to my family, to my boys. And I do that every day. So, and I went to all private institutions. I was very, very, very fortunate to go to colleges, to go to universities at a very high level. I went to Loyola University, and I'm very proud of that because my mother was like, I don't know how I'm going to pay for this. And I just like, you know what? I got it. I worked too. I worked two jobs while I was going to college. But academically, I worked hard and nothing was ever given to me. Nothing was ever given to me.
So how did you get interested in the field of law enforcement, Chief? How did that decision get made that this was the career that you wanted to pursue? You mentioned your mom was in the medical field, and I'm sure you had many opportunities to pursue other avenues of study. But what caused you to get into law enforcement?
It's a different path. I will say that. So, like any parent who wants to have their child go to medical school and be a lawyer, right? Everybody wants to say that as a parent. So my path was going to go to medical school.
Okay.
I was going to become a doctor. I didn't know how, but I was going to do it. When I graduated from Loyola, I was admitted to UIC's public health program, and that was going to be my path to medical school. So, but I no longer lived at home. I had to pay my bills. I had an apartment. I had to buy a car. I had to do all these things. But I always liked working for the community. And one of those jobs was working for the Community Association for Policing Services, which is, communities that work with police hand in hand.
Oh, okay.
So I like that. And one Sergeant Jeff Hughes, God rest his soul, said, "Hey, kid, you know what? The police department is going to have some signups. Take the exam. If you like it, cool. If you don't, you could always leave, but it's a great job. It's full-time benefits. You're going to get a salary. You're going to love it. You can do this, full-time with working with the community. You're great at it." And I said, "Oh, well, what do I have to lose?" Took the exam first day, and 6 months later, I got hired.
How about that?
Yes.
I always find it interesting when you talk to people in their particular careers, it often comes down to one person in your life was a big influence that caused you to take a look at maybe an opportunity that you wouldn't have otherwise. And because of that, here you are.
I agree. That sergeant was actually the sergeant for the community policing office in the 10th district, which is predominantly Hispanic. And I worked a lot with the community and with him. And he saw something that I wasn't ready to see, maybe. And I respected him so much. And I did it. And, 27 years later.
Wow. So here you are, sitting in this chair as Chief of Police of the city of Freeport. Let me ask you, what drew you to this particular job, Chief Frausto? What was it about this position that attracted your attention?
Well, first of all, I think that when it comes down to a career and a profession, there's two different things there. A career is something that you prepare for in order to rise up in the ranks. And that's something that Chicago did for me very well.
Okay.
It really did. Chicago did a phenomenal job with training, putting me in the right place.
Giving you a lot of experiences, I bet.
It really did.
A number of different areas of law enforcement.
I cannot take that away from Chicago. And I learned from the best. Some old school guys that took me under the wing. I had to earn it to be under the wing. I'm going to tell you that. I had to earn it. And I did because I wanted to do it. Then I transitioned into the profession. And the profession then leads you to understand what leadership really is about. And I learned that from a lot of my mentors. I learned that from the officers who worked with me, who worked for me. And at that time, I said, I am ready. It had to come from me. It has to come from you when you can say that you're ready to have this become a profession and then lead. Many people don't understand that you're put into a place of leadership and you don't have the capacity, or you do not have the know-how. And we do a disservice to those people. We really do.
Yes, you're right.
Sometimes we have nepotism and sometimes we have politics. And we still didn't do a good service for them. But when you make it your choice, and this was my choice to now make it into a profession, I said I was ready. I was ready because I know that I was able to give everything that I can give to the next officer, to the next future leader of here in Freeport.
Mm-hmm. And that prompted you to apply for the job.
I did, yes.
Yeah.
So I applied for the job, and I actually called one of my mentors and I said, hey, what do you think? And the first thing he said, number one, you're going to come with me. And he goes, number two, they'd be crazy not to take you. And I said, I need to do something for myself. I need to earn this. I need to understand that this profession that I have chosen, that they are ready for me. And so he said, okay, I'll wait for you.
Okay. Well, I'm wondering, you're only a couple of months into the job, Chief.
Yes.
And you're still learning a lot about the community and about the department. But I'm wondering if you could share some of your short and long-term goals that you have for the Freeport Police Department. What's down the road if everything works out well here?
Well, I believe that everything is working out well now. I know that I have a lot of people that said, hey, once you get yourself settled, I'm like, I was settled from day one. I will tell you that. I have a good training ground where I get like Rob would say, I boil the ocean as quickly as I can possible in order to ensure that what I have to do is I do right for my officers. So I think that what was the most important thing for me to understand is who my officers are and what my department is. That's the first thing.
So that was one of your short-term goals.
That was one of my short-term goals.
Mm-hmm.
I met with my lieutenants one-on-one. I met with all my sergeants one-on-one. I'm still meeting some of my corporals, but I also went to roll calls. I went out on the street. I went out on the street on New Year's Eve. I wanted to know who my officers were.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not really a short-term goal. It's really an immediacy to understand, because I will not stop knowing who my officers and who work with me in this department. That's never going to stop. But I needed to evaluate what made them always get up and put that uniform on.
Mm-hmm.
That's really what my goal was, to understand them, to have to see what their focus was, if their focus was the same as mine. And I will tell you that this place has some hidden talent.
Mm-hmm. One of my experiences in talking with law enforcement officers over the years, that there does seem to be a common denominator in terms of, why do you do this job? And there's a desire to help the community, certainly. And it comes down often to, I want to put bad guys, put them away and get them off our streets so that they're safer. And I bet that's a common denominator that you find too, that there's a love for what these officers do day to day.
Yes, it's a brotherhood.
Mm-hmm.
It's an altruistic way of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just about putting the bad guys away. It's really about having a career that's positioned themselves into a noble arena. That's really what it's about.
Mm-hmm.
And these ladies and gentlemen that I have here in the Freeport Police Department really believe that the reduction of crime, not only is it based on the arrest and taking out the tangible objectives, such as, the guns and the narcotics, but it's also to create an actual relationship with the community.
Mm-hmm.
That's really what it's all about.
Mm-hmm.
And the second thing is that they have trust. They want to build that trust, and they have that trust. A lot of my officers know very well who the community members are, and they do that very well. And that is because the community sees the sincerity. It is the sincerity behind that badge, and they have it. My officers have it.
Do you think in a city the size of Freeport, it's a little easier for officers to get to know the community and individuals more personally and develop those relationships of trust, as opposed to a large city where there may be lots of distractions and lots more people? A little different here in a city the size of Freeport to be able to do that?
I'm going to make a little joke here. Size doesn't matter. What matters is the individual. What matters is the officer, the person who really wants to do it. There's been a lot of successes in very large police agencies in large cities that do very well with understanding their community and having outreach.
Sure.
They really do. And what matters really is that who's in that position. They sincerely want to know what that partnership is, and the community feels it.
Chief Frausto, let me ask you to step back and take a look at cities the size of Freeport in the Midwest. What are some challenges you think face all of those communities?
I really can't speak about what other Midwest agencies have as challenges because they're very, very unique. Okay.
Depends on the location and the constituency and the demographics and all of those kinds of things, I'm sure.
A lot that's a portion of it. I will say that, but I think that really it comes down to the leadership, the vision, the community protection on both ends, where the community protects its officers and its officers protect the community. The enhancement of what both parties believe is public safety. And then the fact that in all reality, it's really the sincerity and the nobility behind that officer. Because I will say this, if they, and this is the way I think, I'm not saying about anybody else, anyone else who actually sat in this chair. The way I think is, if I expect my officers to do a certain action, that expectation is on me too. If I expect them to speak with people in a challenging situation, I will do that too. I cannot just sit here in this office and lead and point. That's not what I do. I think the challenge comes in regards to what is brought into the motivation of that police department and what that individual person who is called chief, superintendent, whatever that title is, what respect they bring to that title and the respect that they actually give their officers and how much those officers believe that they're protected. And I have said this before, my officers are one of the greatest officers that I have worked with. I will say that being out there, because I do go out there operationally, I do police out there. I do go to calls. I take calls myself. I go to the locations that we know that need a little bit more help. I am going with them, and I see the outstanding work that they do, from de-escalating situations to actually talking with people and trying to get more information from them. I wouldn't be able to be a good leader if I didn't go out there on the street with them. And I think that's probably the challenge that most of us have, because sometimes we don't have time.
Yeah. We get caught up in administrative things, the desk work, and those kinds of things that can draw you away from being in the midst of the activity out on the street.
Yes. I have long hours here, and I'm more than happy to do these long hours here.
I want to switch gears just a little bit here, Chief, and ask you, in your 25 plus years of experience in law enforcement, what are some of the major developments or changes you've seen? Maybe not only in how policing occurs, but even in terms of the technology that's available to law enforcement. What kinds of changes have you witnessed in the last 25 to 30 years?
I think that part of the word technology is it can be a hindrance and it could help. So I will talk about the hindering. The technology that we have is very good with attempting to extract the numbers that we need in order to justify certain actions. To understand, like, for example, our calls for service, to understand if there's a certain location that we have a lot more calls for service than other locations.
Okay, and that would affect your decision making about what needs to happen differently in those areas.
Yeah, direct patrol, or there's something going on, or maybe there's a need for mental health awareness in a certain area. Maybe I need a social worker to get there all the time. So then there's that, the collaboration that we look at. But what people don't understand is that technology does not replace the police officer. And I think that is what the public is sometimes saying, but that's not what we do. It's also allowing us to come up with, violence reduction strategies in order to create policies that would assess what we need to put into direct patrolling. It's accountability. but it will never replace our officer. You can't put a number, you can't put technology on the soft conversation that an officer has to conduct with somebody who is in the middle of a mental health crisis.
Right.
And I think that's the notion that we have to give the public. And sometimes when we throw a number out there, everyone starts making assumptions of what that number is and the technology is for.
I want to ask you a question that is on a lot of people's minds right now. And it's hard to ignore the fact that nationally, immigration officials are increasingly moving into communities, often unannounced, to enforce federal civil immigration laws. How is the department here in the city of Freeport prepared to deal with that possibility?
So we have policies in place. We would like more conversations at deconflicting. And I think this is something that immigration or ICE may or may not do. I cannot say that. I can't speak on the other cities on that behalf. But I will say that the protection of my community residents is the most important. The protection of my officers is the utmost importance. The collaboration is important. And I think what the TV media and what their process is not with collaboration of that city agency and the police agency. And
that could lead to a lot of problems and a lot of friction points. And oh my gosh.
Absolutely. It does. But when it comes down to law enforcement, we are here to uphold the reverence of the law. And our law in Freeport has nothing to do with citizenship.
Right. Yeah. The police department here in Freeport is charged with enforcing state and federal criminal laws, not civil laws, which is what the immigration enforcement is often about, is the civil law, that's federal civil law.
Yes. And that's the one thing that I think a lot of our cities who are under scrutiny right now, I mean, Chicago had it. There was a lot of policies that were not enacted. There wasn't a lot of conversation. It was just people showing up and we pretty much had to clean house. And that's not what I want for Freeport. I want to have an open dialogue.
Right.
I want to understand, that sometimes when they come into a city, you're coming to my house.
Right. This is our place.
You knock on my door and we will have a conversation. It's just a respect for that. And I have to protect what's in my house. I have to protect within the law, my community residents and everybody that works here and lives here.
If I'm living in a Freeport neighborhood and someone or something is happening in my neighborhood that's making me uncomfortable, whether it's the presence of people who are I'm not used to seeing, or whether it's some kind of activity that's bothering me, what do you recommend citizens do? What are the steps people need to take to make sure that they feel safe and secure in this home in which they live?
Well, the first thing is their safety. There should be no engagement. You just don't know what is happening or what they have. Separate yourselves, go inside your home, dial 911, and give a good description of what you're able to see. Especially when it comes down to if they had anything in their hand, what they look like, and just don't engage. Let us handle that. I think that's really important. And the fact that your safety is a lot more important than you standing there and possibly getting yourself hurt.
Or taking issue with something might be occurring, to disengage from that, to not engage is what you're telling people.
Do not engage. Yeah. Yes.
And to call the authorities, call 911 and describe what it is that's happening.
Correct.
And what you see.
Yes.
I'm wondering, you mentioned it a little bit earlier, Chief Frausto, that you put in a lot of long hours, and law enforcement does entail a lot of long hours and hard work. What are the biggest rewards that come for you as a police officer, as a member of the law enforcement community? What do you take away at the end of the day that makes it all worthwhile?
Good question. So when I leave here really late at night, Do you know what it is? And I'm going to say this. I get the night shift sometimes comes over and sees my light on or sees my car. They come to my door and say, Chief, go home. Are you okay? Do you want anything to eat? Yeah, I'm worried. I need for you to still come back tomorrow.
Well, good. I'm glad someone's looking out for you.
They are. Or I go downstairs and they're in roll call, or I go downstairs and they're processing and they get shocked. Like, go home. We got this.
What are you doing here?
Yes. What are you doing here? And usually it's because it's quiet and I get all of my thinking out. I'm reading. I'm really want to understand in order for me to create, a better policy to actually safeguard them, in order to understand, our history. And then I have a lot of plans for them. I have a lot of thoughts. And so when it's quiet, this is where I catch up. But I think that's the most rewarding, where they're just like, either you're going to drive yourself home in 6 minutes or we're going to drive you home in 5 minutes.
So is having people looking out for you and having that, I'm back to the word you used earlier, a brotherhood or camaraderie that exists, a family.
Yes.
Feeling that makes it all worthwhile.
It does. I think that's the best thing ever, because I don't want them to think that they can't talk to me. I don't want them to think that it's not possible to have a conversation, because I wear the vest and I'm out there with them too as well. Good
for you. Well, this has been a fascinating interview, Chief Frausto. I'm so glad you took some time on a busy Wednesday morning to talk a little bit with us. I'm wondering, before we sign off and say goodbye to our listeners here for this interview, if you have any final thoughts or words that you'd like to share with us.
Well, thank you for inviting me. That's number one. I think it's important that we actually address all these different questions with the different types of listeners that you may have, especially since we talked about technology. We have these podcasts that people like to listen to. I think the messaging is important. I believe that getting them to know who I am from a different point of view, from a different avenue, is important. But my final thought is this, and I think everyone always asks me this. They always ask, why Freeport? I'm going to tell you why Freeport. Freeport is a great community. Freeport has some great talent. Freeport really needs to understand that they are very deserving of a great police department. It was a police department that was great. It's a police department that I'm going to make it even greater.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Chief Frausto, for your time and for your leadership and for your dedication to the job. We're grateful for that. And also grateful for all the folks in the department that are part of this endeavor. This is Alan Wenzel reminding you to tune into Freepod's regular news podcast, airing at noon on Thursdays on all major podcast platforms. And be sure to tune into our weekly interviews, which drop every Tuesday at noon in those same locations. Our thanks, as always, goes out to the Mass Communications Department at Highland Community College for producing these podcasts for Freepod. Thank you all for listening.